a demilitarization of Gaza. Hamas has to be removed completely from power. Israel has to maintain its security protocol, being able to operate freely in there. But when he said also about rebuilding Gaza, he mentioned specifically that the United Nations should not play a part in this.
The Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City is a death zone, according to the team from the World Health Organization that have been on the ground investigating. UN official confirmed that the presence of mass grave near the entrance and have warned that the hospital was barely functioning. Meanwhile, a deal to release some of the hostages is close, according to reports in the Washington Post. Some women and children may be freed in exchange for a 5-day ceasefire. Well, joining us now from Tel Aviv is Jewish News' foreign editor, Jotam Confino. Jotam, good to speak to you again. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
What does it mean for the Al-Shifa hospital? The WHO said that, look, it can't function as a hospital anymore. There's no water, no electricity. What does it mean for the Israeli armed forces that are currently on the ground?
Well, it means that it can finally go in and fully search the entire hospital compound and to look for the evidence that they say that they already have, but to look for more evidence of Hamas having a command center underground, because up until now it's been extremely difficult to navigate when there are patients, sick patients and displaced Palestinians inside the hospital compound. Now it's more or less evacuated, and this means that Israel is now starting an extremely intense search for these tunnels. It says it's already found a few tunnel shafts, but that to produce evidence of that, it takes time, mainly because some of these tunnels could be booby-trapped. So it's not something you can go in and produce within 24 hours and show the world. But this is basically what Israel is doing now that the hospital is more or less evacuated.
We're hearing that 31 babies have been transported to Egypt from the Al-Shifa hospital. That news is breaking at the moment. What is happening to the rest of the patients, Jotam? We know that everyone's been instructed to move south, even though now in the south, in Khan Yunis, we've been told that people have already been told to leave that city as well. Where are people going to be going?
Well, they're going to be going to different places in the south. Obviously, it's horrific. There aren't any really good places to go. There are some hospitals that are still functioning. They'll mainly be going there. And in the meantime, we know that, for example, the United Arab Emirates are trying to establish a field hospital in southern Gaza. So we assume that some of them would be able to go there as well. And in general, it's a nightmare, really, because they might be leaving a war zone in the north, but they're going to another zone that is slowly but surely also turning into a war zone. Israel has said that it's going to go south. Now, what does that mean for the civilians there? Well, it means either they need to cross into Sinai or they need to be relocated back to northern Gaza, but there's nothing to come back to. So this is a really, really horrific situation, especially for those who are ill and who need constant treatment.
Can you give us the latest on this idea of a deal? The Qatar PM says that only very minor obstacles to hostage release deal remain, and these are mainly practical and logistical issues. What's the Israeli government said about this?
The Israeli government keeps mum, and mainly to protect the families, because they know that these rumors have been circulating for weeks about impending deals, and in general, it is not commenting on it publicly because it could, first of all, it could influence the negotiations in a bad way if it says something that's interpreted in the wrong way, but also not to give false hope to the family. So all we have to go by are foreign media quoting usually Qatari officials, but also publicly stated now by Qatar that it's quite imminent, it seems as if it is, which is obviously great news. It means that if this is true, 50 children and women would be able to leave Gaza in return for a 5-day ceasefire, and in also return for more humanitarian aid and fuel coming into Gaza. So all in all, that is very, very positive if that's true, but we will only know once there is an official announcement from the Israeli government and from Hamas.
How much pressure is the Israeli government when it comes to the hostages? Yesterday, we saw a rather large march focused on the Israeli prime minister. That pressure is building. How is it being dealt with within the Israeli government?
Look, the Israeli government is slowly falling apart, I think it's safe to say. Not only is Netanyahu's partners, they are slowly turning against him. Some of them are furious with the fact that fuel has now been let into to Gaza without the hostages being released. And on the ground, you have 30,000 people yesterday in Jerusalem on a 5-day march protesting in front of his residence, and many of them are calling for him to resign. Every day that goes by without the hostages being released is a catastrophe. It's a national trauma that is just not ending. And we've seen 2 bodies of hostages found just a couple of days ago by the Israeli army. So when those bodies were found, obviously that increases the anxiety among those families. They're just waiting for horrific news to come out about their loved ones. So the government is really under immense pressure on this particular issue when it comes to hostages.
And Jotam, when it comes to the families, the thousands of people who marched yesterday who want to see those hostages returned, have they expressed an opinion for how this should go about? Are they saying to their government, just do a deal, whatever deal it is, whether it involves releasing Palestinian prisoners who we know are in Israeli jails, just do it and get the hostages back? Or is there still a lot of support on the military intervention that we're seeing in Gaza?
So you're right in both predictions of both answers. First of all, they are ready to give Hamas whatever it wants just to get their children and their elderly back. But they are at the same time saying that Hamas should, of course, be destroyed after. It's not as if they're ready to make a peace deal with Hamas in exchange for their hostages and then to let Hamas continue ruling Gaza. Nobody in Israel is ready for that. Nobody. I haven't met a single person yet who's ready for that. But any parent, any person who has a loved one held hostage by a terrorist organization would be willing to give everything. And that means thousands of Palestinian prisoners with blood on their hands. It means fuel. It means aid. It doesn't matter. They are just fed up with being kept in the dark. They know very little about what's going on. And they aren't being included in decision making because the decisions are being made by the security cabinet, not by the families. And they feel very left out, neglected, and not listened to be frank.
Has the Israeli government spoken about what victory looks like, Jotam?
Yeah.
We know that the ultimate goal is the eradication of Hamas, at least the eradication to the extent that Hamas will be incapable of carrying out yet another atrocity similar to what we saw on October the 7th. But have we been told what victory looks like and how close we are to this victory? Have we been given numbers of Hamas fighters that have been killed or taken out, leaders that have been taken out? How do we know what the progress is so far?
If we start with the number of Hamas terrorists killed, we heard from the commander of the Air Force the other day who said thousands had been killed. Mm-hmm. And that's excluding the some 1,500 to 2,000 terrorists that were killed in the first couple of days in Israel, not in Gaza, but those who had crossed the border into Israel. So we assume in Israel they're talking about between 3,000 to 4,000 terrorists killed altogether. And when it comes to a more specific plan as to what should happen in Gaza the day after Hamas, I spoke to an Israeli minister, Gideon Sa'ar, who's a member of the security cabinet. And he actually gave me some quite detailed answer about what it should look like. First of all, he, of course, repeated what Netanyahu is saying. A demilitarization of Gaza. Hamas has to be removed completely from power. Israel has to maintain its security protocol, being able to operate freely in there. But when he said also about rebuilding Gaza, he mentioned specifically that the United Nations should not play a part in this because it has failed completely to prevent radicalization in schools and in what they're being taught, mainly the kids, what they're being taught in UNRWA schools. So he suggested that Egypt and, for example, Saudi Arabia, moderate regimes, as he said, should help with rebuilding Gaza. And in education should really prioritize not having incitement against Israel and Jews so as to have a new generation that isn't an army of Hamas loyalists.
Jotam, thank you so much for giving us your time. Always good to speak to you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Jotam Confino there, Tel Aviv's Jewish News foreign editor.